Birger Sandzén is very special. Birger Sandzén was born in Sweden and came to America, where he moved to Lindsborg, Kansas. He pretty much became the art department at Bethany College. He taught a little bit of everything. When he first applied there, he knew that there was a Swedish man who had founded the college, so he wrote a letter asking if there was a position available for a young Swede. And the director, Dr. Carl Aaron Svensson, wrote back immediately saying, "Come at once." So Sandzén got to teach languages, he got to teach music, he led the choir, drawing classes, painting classes, and ultimately, because of his intense energy, Lindsborg, Kansas became a really well-known arts colony. And it still is. In our collection, we have one painting by Birger Sandzén, and then we have probably a couple dozen prints. The prints are in various techniques. What he was most well known for were his woodcuts. We also have a few lithographs. This lithograph is called A Kansas Creek, and it has some of Birger Sandzén's kind of famous trees, lyrical, energetic line, hills back here. See some of the reflections down at the bottom, and then these clouds, which are done with a lighter pencil on that lithostone, so they don't hold quite as much ink. You can get a lot of drama with a lithograph. This is a woodcut by Sandzén that has some of his buildings. A lot of his scenes, since they were done out in rural Kansas, will include farm buildings, every now and again a factory, but mostly farm buildings and homesteads. This one has a lot of energy in the woodcut. You can see in these white areas where the paper remains kind of how he gouged and tore a little bit into the wood. That gives you a real expressive texture. It looks real, almost Van Gogh-like, because of these lines that just sort of wiggle around the paper. This is one of Birger Sandzén's more unusual woodcuts. It is a very dark scene, perhaps at night, and the way he made this woodcut was that he took one of those antique nails that were square on the sides, pounded it into the wood, and then pulled it out. So he's almost using a stippling effect with woodcut. In this piece, I think you can start to see some of Georges Seurat's influence. When Sandzén was in Paris, he was very interested in post-impressionism, especially Georges Seurat's work. So these little rows of tiny dots, almost, you have to pull back a little bit before it starts emerging into a scene. When you're up close, all you see are the little squiggles and lines. But then when you pull back, there's a certain distance where your eye kind of pops, and it becomes something that your brain can interpret as a whole scene. Birger Sandzén's painting style is very distinctive. He used very, very thick paint, almost like frosting on a cake. Art historians call that impasto. It's Italian for pasty. So when you get up close to this painting, you can see these really thick globs of paint, which give it a wonderful texture. It adds a lot of energy to the surface, too. And then when you look into the shadows, you'll see another one of Sandzén's kind of trademarks, which is that he did not use black pigment for his shadows. He would only use really intense dots of pure color. So his shadows are done with this kind of plum color, a dark blue, a dark green, a dark turquoise, and that is, when you step back, how your eye puts together the shadows. But he thought black paint muddied the purity of the color. So one of Sandzén's visual trademarks is this real intense, bright pastel, not quite neon, but very, very intense color. And I love even this aqua green over here. I think that Sandzén's art is about the space that he found in Kansas and about this really luscious landscape that he was inspired by. And his students would also be inspired by that, I think because of his interest in it. He loved looking at scenes that were really simple and finding the beauty in them. And I think because his work is so consistently about that, it becomes not just a celebration of landscape, but also a celebration of color and texture, and just looking for those details that a lot of people would ignore. We collect Birger Sandzén's work because he's one of the more influential artists in Kansas. Often when you see one of his students' work, you can tell that they studied with him. He was instrumental in starting a lot of the arts organizations. He was active in the Topeka Art Guild. He would come to Topeka and lead either workshops where you would go out and paint, or he would give presentations on his work, demonstrations. He was incredibly supportive of other artists. And I think that was one of the things that made Topeka such an active part of the arts community. And then reaching out to Lindsborg and the surrounding Midwest, because there were a lot of heavy hitters here in Topeka and here in Kansas. He would do a lot of traveling, both to paint and make his artwork, and also to promote arts in Kansas. That was a cool thing back in the 1890s to early 20th century, because a lot of people kind of assumed that the Midwest was sort of this cultural wasteland. It wasn't. There was a lot happening here.